Hey, everybody, it's Heather, and it's been a couple weeks. I hope this video live finds you doing well, and we are full on into summer. So, I thought we would talk a little bit about um, showing up for yourself when you essentially haven't been shown how to show up for yourself by the people who were your first caregivers, parents, grandparents, guardians, if you were in foster care, the first people that were totally responsible for taking care of you as a child. Because as children, we are utterly dependent upon our caregivers to provide us what we need. And that includes our physical needs, um, as well as our emotional and psychological needs. And oftentimes with parenting, we experience maybe having the physical needs, but there wasn't as much attention on the emotional health and the psychological health. And then in some cases, some people have experienced where they had neither. They did not have physical safety, security, and then, of course, their emotional and psychological needs weren't met as well. And so, in those cases, when I work with clients as a coach who have experience like that, where they aren't sure how to be compassionate with themselves as they begin to become conscious of the pain um, that they experienced in their earliest years, which ultimately impacts how they show up in the world as adults. So I thought we would talk about that today. And it's a tough subject. It's hard. It's very close to my heart, and very close to my soul because I experienced parts of it, certainly on the emotional level. I also want to remind you I'm not a therapist. Have a lot of training in relationship therapy and imago uh, ther- therapy training, but I am not a clinician. I am not a certified, licensed clinician as far as a therapist. I am a coach, I have a lot of self education, but do keep that in mind, particularly if you are dealing with trauma from the past or situations where you experienced things that were traumatic. Understand coaching is one element of the giving you the support, but therapeutic approach, clinical approach is always going to be beneficial. And it's important to be able to do that with someone who is trained in that very specific category of therapeutic support as a clinician. So just wanted to make that clear because this is a subject that will bring up um, possibly some memories and emotions. And yes, we can work through them, but sometimes we need that extra support. So I always want to remind you of that. Okay, let's jump right in. Showing up for you when we weren't shown what healthy support looks and feels like in hard situations. And I want to say that in specifically healthy support. So sometimes we may have experienced more support that functioned like codependency, where maybe someone was rescuing us all the time or enabling us to continue a certain behavior. When I say healthy support, I'm talking about a support that is both honoring of you, yourself, and your capabilities and responsibilities and accountability, as well as the other person who is offering the support and where boundaries are essential. Also, it's the hard situations I'm talking about today. Certainly, there is an element of showing up for yourself in those wonderful, beautiful, sweet moments where joy is there, and it's even difficult for us to grasp joy because we may feel like it could go away at any time. That's a different type of conversation. Today I'm just going to focus on showing up for you in hard situations when we weren't shown what healthy support looks and feels like. So as children, when hard difficult situations happen, We need to be shown how to walk through them. Children are very open and flexible and adaptable and are like little sponges. But we need to be shown, okay, this hard situation went on, walk me through it. That's what children need. This is a skill. It's not like we're born understanding how to do this. Like taking our first steps or riding a bike, we need present, engaged support when we go through hard, ouchy, difficult situations. And they could be anything. It could be bullying at school, it could be the death of a grandparent, the death of a sibling, a parent. It could be a divorce. It could be a separation of the parents. It could be talking through a friendship that suddenly is not going well for the child, and the child doesn't understand why that person doesn't want to be friends with them anymore. So, again, these are all really hard, ouchy things, right? Yet, we assume people just, or kids will just adapt, and kids do adapt. Absolutely. They are absolutely adapt. They can adapt to a lot. However, we need to be able to make sure that we walk through with our children or the young people that we have in our lives, be able to show up and be present and engaged in teaching them the skill of emotionally walking through a difficult situation. It's a skill. It's something that is modeled, and oftentimes it's not. So as children, we are open books and we experience life freely and openly, right? We want to understand why we feel ouchy, hard feelings. When we are children, we naturally are going to be curious and open to learning about feelings, because feelings are not scary to children. They feel what they feel. They have temper tantrums when they're toddlers. They get angry, they get upset. They express themselves usually pretty clearly. So they're an open book. And children want to understand why they feel ouchy, hard feelings in ouchy, hard situations. They want to understand. They truly do. The trouble is that the caregivers, our caregivers, really do the best they can with what they know. And I want to emphasize that, because there is a level of compassion and empathy that I think is important to bring forward in this. Um, our parents, our guardians, the situation we were placed in as children, where whoever those caretakers were, they did the best they could with what they knew. Absolutely, there are situations where their caregivers were not, knew better, and did horrible things. And I want to make that clear. But I think most of the time, our parents, guardians, caregivers do the best they can with what they know. It's sort of like you're driving down the road as a driver of a car and you've never changed a flat tire. So you feel the tire burst and you safely get to the side of the road and you get out and you're looking at the flat tire like, I don't even know where to start. And maybe your cell phone battery's dead and you can't even call for help. So can you imagine what it's going to be like that first time trying to change that tire and you've never done it before? So when caregivers have never really learned how to meet themselves in emotional pain, it is almost impossible for them to know how to meet a child in their emotional pain. And so it might show up in a couple of different ways. It can show up in a lot of different ways. However, these are the two that it tends to happen. They may overreact. They may tend to fix or get angry. A lot of language is, what are you crying for? You need to stop crying. You need to just move on. It's not that bad. Let it go. Hey, let's go get some ice cream and it'll be all better. That kind of overreacting, hypervigilance, because just sitting with the emotional pain feels really, really vulnerable. Also, that vulnerability can show up as underreacting, which is avoiding, denying it happened, ignoring it, or withdrawing. So, that overreaction and underreaction are a normal response to not knowing how to meet another person in emotional pain, to be present. And I think this is it. It's getting better in our society, but I would say for the most part, my generation growing up, emotions were just not something we talked about. It's just not something we talked about. How I was feeling as a child was not even on the table. It was basically on, this is what you need to do. If you do this, you're good. If you follow the rules, you're good. If you don't follow the rules, you get in trouble. And then we're not going to talk about how you feel, because how you feel is not important. And that's just kind of how I experienced it, felt it, right? So, and it's a lot because my own parents really went through some traumatic experiences and did not know how to meet me and my siblings in our emotional pain. At least for me, it was very clear that was simply not something on the table. So, as adults, so we talk about these childhood, and we're like, okay, what does this have to do with the present day as adults? Well, as adults, we carry these experiences and really take on those behavioral patterns of overreacting or underreacting in response to emotional pain. We unconsciously, we're not conscious that we take on these patterns. We're not conscious that we actually overreact or underreact. We just say, this is how I am, this is how I perceive myself, and so we react. So we unconsciously embody what was modeled for us until we become conscious of them. And when we become conscious of them through reflection, through working with the therapist, through talking with a coach like myself, we become conscious of these behaviors that really kind of surprise us sometimes, and maybe even enlighten us as to why certain situations may activate or trigger us. So, this is the iceberg, and there's the part that we see and the part that we don't see. And it's below the waterline is what we don't see. Now, which one is more dangerous? The bigger one, right? What sunk the Titanic was not the tip, but the bulk of the iceberg. And what is kind of unsettling is when we see this image, we're like, whew, if I'm that iceberg, what is on the outside people see is only a tiny part of me as a whole. And that's where this image can be really helpful. To just see visually where the top of the iceberg is a really kind of external situation. It's our behavior for sure. It's how we physically show up in the world. It could be our temperament, our habits, our family roles, the kind of friends we are, our career preferences, what we like, what we don't like, our personality, our hobbies, our style, um, whether we like to exercise or not. All those things are really kind of how we show up in the world. People see us and perceive us. But what we don't see beneath the waterline are these deeper wounds that are usually, sometimes, um, unconsciously um, passed down to us from our parents who did not know how to handle these particular things. They did not know another way. In many cases, of course, we know that child abuse happens tragically. And those situations are beyond my comprehension. But I can imagine certainly what sexual abuse feels like, because I experienced that. Bullying, I experienced that. So all of these things below the waterline really are, these are examples of these kind of core wounds that we have with us throughout our life. And we usually are not conscious that these pains beneath the waterline are going to show up in our behavior above the waterline until we become conscious of them. So I want to talk about how the brain responds to ouchy, difficult, hard situations that can help us begin to harness self-awareness. So there's 3 questions the brain asks. Number 1, am I safe? So the part of the brain, which is the amygdala, it's the oldest part of the brain, and it has everything to do with our physical survival safety. It responds as if there is a saber-toothed tiger around the corner that we need to be prepared to fight or run from. And so that is where all of our motor function is, so our physicality. It also has to do with our temperature, where our temperature can go up. Our breathing can become very rapid, and our reflexes are involved, right? So if you think of fight or flight, it's got to be a quick. So this is the oldest part of the brain. And when we feel activated, triggered, or in any way unsafe, this is the question this part of the brain asks is, am I safe? And if the brain feels like we're not safe, all of these things are going to get activated and we're going to feel it in our body. So we're going to feel our heart rate go up, we're going to feel our breathing become shallow, and we're going to feel this sense of either hypervigilance to activate, to urgently do something, or to withdraw, avoid, hide in order to survive. So it's all about survival. The second question the brain asks is, am I loved? So this limbic system, which is the red area of the brain, it's in the center, is where we hold, it holds all the information about our hormones, our habits, our social bonding, how we bond to our caregivers, how we bond to friends and intimate relationships, our moods. Also, it's a lot where it holds memory, particularly emotional memory. So if you think about maybe when you were growing up, your caregiver or caregivers making your favorite meal, and when you walked in from school, you could smell it. That smell, if you smelled it today, that distinct smell would bring up an emotional response in you. This is the part of the brain that controls that. So the question it asks is, am I loved? So it's one step ahead of the am I safe? So if the brain says, yes, we're safe in our body, we're not physically in danger. Am I loved? Am I loved and valued in these relationships, or is there danger of me getting hurt or rejected or abandoned? So this is where all the bonding happens. And the third and final question is, what can I learn from this? So the frontal cortex is where all of logic is, empathy, problem solving, language, attention, creativity, curiosity, imagination, self-control, analysis, sensations, and perception. So this part of the brain is the I would say the youngest part of the brain, and it is the part of the brain where we really distinguish ourselves from other animals on this planet, because we are able to go into a place of logic. By using the frontal cortex, we problem solve, we can come up with new ways of doing things, we can create a language to identify and explain our human experience, etc. But the big question is, what can I learn from this situation? So perhaps there was a situation where you weren't sure if you were safe, so your brain's like, am I safe? And you're like, I feel safe. And then it goes to, okay, emotional memory, and are we feeling safe in relationship? Do we feel that we are loved? And if so, then we can go to this frontal cortex place where, what can I learn from this? But we need to allow the other 2 parts of the brain to be able to ask those questions. And the safe question, am I safe, is going to be first. And then the second question is am I loved? So if I don't feel, if both of those, either one of those or no, you're not going to get to this place of the frontal lobe. You need to be able to allow and kind of walk your body through. I'm safe in my body. There's no saber-toothed tiger. And I can show up for myself, even if in relationship it feels vulnerable to share what I'm feeling, would be a good example. So those are the three questions that the brain's going to ask when we go through hard, ouchy situations. And it's going to go in order. So am I safe? Physical response, heart rate goes up, shallow breathing, feeling that sense of urgency to either run, fight, or flee. We're not really sure. But when we allow help, we can do things to help our body calm down, to help our nervous system calm down, so that we can answer that question, I'm safe, I'm safe. And then go to the next question, am I loved? And then when we answer that question, yes, I am loved, I am supported, then I can go to that place of really reflecting, meditating, that cognitive function that is where we see things in a much broader perspective, and we can even apply language to what we're feeling, which is where the writing prompts come along. So here's 3 steps to showing up for you. So there's a lot more, especially with regard to emotional health and acknowledging your feelings, but I really nailed it down to these 3. So you want to tune into your body, number 1. So because that first question is, am I safe? The brain's going to ask, it's a physical sensation. So you want to be able to, when you feel activated or you feel that that situation happen that is hard, ouchy, uncomfortable, I want you to tune into your body. I want you to get out of your brain and go to your body. And where do you feel the pain? Do you feel the pain in your stomach? Are you feeling nauseous? Is your chest tight? Are you wringing your hands? Are your fists clenched? Is your shoulders tense? Are they going up to your ears? Those are kind of where you can where do I feel the emotional pain? Where do I feel it in my body? And acknowledge it by placing your hand on it. So if it was your shoulder, you'd put your hands on your shoulder. If it was your chest that was tight, you can put your hand right on your chest. The same with your belly. But you want to just acknowledge it by placing your hand on the area of your body, kinesthetically touching your body in the place where you feel the pain. And you need to allow that to happen over a period of minutes. I would also recommend that doing breath work, taking slow breaths in and out. So you'd breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And it's called square breathing. So it's 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold, and then you do it again. So it's a square. Number 2, check your self-talk. So when we feel in hard situations that we feel frightened or we feel overwhelmed, often there's a self-talk that's happening that, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this again? Wow, you really messed that situation up at work. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. So if you wouldn't say that to a friend, then don't say it to yourself. Okay? There are parts of you, there is a little you, there's a 20-year-old version of you, and on and on and on to your current age that deserves to be heard. And oftentimes that pain you're feeling is from a part of you that is wounded and hurt and simply wants to be acknowledged. But when we talk to it unkindly, talk to those parts of ourselves unkindly that are hurting, it only makes it worse. So speak kindly to yourself. And if you wouldn't say it to a friend, don't say it to yourself. And number 3, reframe the story. So reframing is really helpful. And I call reframing as kind of stepping back, getting perspective on the situation that's happening, and reframing the story I might be telling myself about it. And that's when we work on the writing prompts. So part 1, a recent situation when I felt like a significant person did not show up for me was, in this situation, I felt the feelings reminded me of. Recalling that, I think I needed, but I didn't get it. So it makes sense that I did that because And then part two. So take the time to go through part one. And then part two is the story that I tell myself about how this significant person did not show up for me is the truth is, knowing this, I can try to reframe this story by, if I do this, I may be more able to. And in this work, I'm learning that some of the stories I tell myself are. And lastly, one way I will show up for myself today is. And that's really it. That is the bulk of the work of reframing the story as you lean into those writing prompts. And the writing prompts just help your brain get the language in order to name the experience, name what the situation was like, name the environment, name what was going through your head. It gives language to it, which then gives you the ability to see beyond your fear. Okay, so the podcast will be dropping on Wednesday. So this live video will be dropped on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Also, feel free to go to letsfeelgoodnow.com /get the goods to get the emotional roadmap. And that is all we have for today, my friends. I hope you have a wonderful couple of weeks, and I will see you soon. Bye.